Welcome to Lakers Central. Hey, Vinay, remember the days when the Lakers were bad and it wasn't a 24-hour thing like covering this team? You remember that?
It was a very interesting time in Laker Nation. We were trying to get Genie to sell the team. Well, I wouldn't say we, because I definitely wasn't saying that, but um, there's a lot of turmoil and conversation around all that kinds of stuff, and we were stressing every small move, every big move, every progression, and every regression. And lo and behold, the most polarizing player on the Lakers. No, not Anthony Davis. No, not LeBron James. Kyle Kuzma has agreed to an extension today, per Woj. It's a 3-year, $40 million extension, and it looks like it has a player option in the 2023-2024 season. So I think basically the last year of his contract, he
Right.
has a player option, so you can opt out. And re-engage in the market when he's about 28 if he can increase his value, or he feels like he can increase his value, or he could just take his player option and stick with the Lakers and then see if he has a continuing future with them. But I'm just going to say this before we start.
hmm
I'm going to look right into the camera because I know some of you guys watch this, and I know when I say this next line, I know the people that I'm addressing this to are also watching this because I know you guys are going to say this on your podcast or in your analysis later. 7 months ago, 7 months ago, at about mid-season mark, there was a lot of chatter about sending Kuzma away at the trade deadline, and I understand there was a little bit of you know, apprehension. A lot of people were a little upset that he wasn't being consistent, and I remember distinctly being the person arguing with a lot of people saying the way he's being used is not right, and his lack of volume in terms of opportunity, scoring opportunity, consistency, it's not there. It's
hmm
hard to expect a guy to be Klay Thompson when he's not Klay Thompson. After that point, the Lakers reluctantly kept Kuzma, much to the chagrin of everybody on Lakers Twitter. And, granted, there was a hiatus because of the pandemic. He was able to get healthy. And though he wasn't like amazing in the playoffs, he was better. And he ended up being a rotational guy, basically a 3-and-D guy that we could at least rely on to some degree to stay in front of some guys. So he did show an improvement there. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is for one very specific reason. Because I'm watching those same folks on the timeline now talk about how Kuzma's lack of volume and lack of opportunity was the reason why he wasn't successful. So I'm just going to say that I'm not the type of guy to say, I told you so, but I told you so. And I don't really care to go up on Lakers Twitter and like argue with people and remind them of the things that they were saying to me. I did have very knowledgeable analytical folks throwing numbers at me when I was telling them that Rajon Rondo was looking off Kuzma constantly. And I'm not surprised that after 3 preseason games of seeing Marc Gasol set up Kuzma on easy cuts and stuff like that, that his numbers can be better. So all I'm going to say is this: I remember the folks who were telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about. And this extension isn't validation of that, but this extension tells me that maybe the Lakers staff is looking at him a little bit differently than we're looking at him. And that even if he doesn't necessarily reach the level of ceiling or level of improvement that we expect out of him, it's a pretty good deal. And I would appreciate it if we start taking that sort of approach when it comes to all the other guys that we have on our roster. Instead of trying to discuss them in terms of like what they can't do, try to reframe the way that you think about basketball and the way that we talk about this team, and think about where are the small areas that they can improve. We're already doing that with Montrezl Harrell when people are telling us that he can't play defense, and he's small schematic for me, and I'm not anybody's face. Uh, I didn't know if Kuhn or not me that he couldn't get better. Now say that he can get better. So that is my personal victory. And me, I'm not one to go around and say anything to anybody in silence because I know it that way. So I'm glad that he got extended. I actually do think that he could end up becoming somebody who's an important role player for us. We don't have too many guys that are 6'8", 6'9", forwards in the league at his age that's willing to do what it takes to win a championship. That's the number one most important thing. He's willing to just like, all right, I'm playing next to LeBron. I'm playing next to Anthony Davis. Let's roll. I don't need to worry about my stats. Clearly, we could see that if he gets enough touches, he's able to score. He's an active cutter. He's an active defender. But when he plays next to Anthony Davis and LeBron, he's not going to get shots. He's not going to get his stats. He's not going to get any of that. And the Lakers aren't extending him because they're not just extending him based on what they think he can be. They know he can do it, but they're asking him to do less because they need him to be a star in his role. So I'm glad that he got it, whether he's with the Lakers or not. It is a very tradable contract, so there's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad that he was like compensated. And I think the larger story that we should have about this is how Rob Pelinka is taking the kind of the umbrella or the shadow of a big contract out of the conversation for a guy like Kuzma, and letting him know that, look, we took care of you. You helped us deliver a championship to Los Angeles. Now let's go get a couple more, and then you can go and do whatever you want, and you can play play the market or whatever you want when the time comes. So I think Rob has done a really tremendous job. This deal as well as Pope's deal are really, really good deals in my opinion, because me and you have talked about like Kuzma could probably ask for like around 15 million a year, and to get him under that number is pretty tremendous.
Look, man, you know me. I typically agree with you, so you're not going to find any disputes there. Look, Rob Pelinka, he stays getting it done, man. And let me go on a little rant for a second.
Sure.
Bogdan Bogdanovic signed with the Hawks for $72 million over 4 years, roughly $18 million a year, and he's 28 years old. And so, if you're looking for maybe a comparable contract, maybe even player, even though they play a little bit differently, Bogdan is comparable in my opinion. And coincidentally, Bogdanovic went 27th overall in the 2014 draft, although he didn't actually come over until 2017, which was the same year Kyle Kuzma was drafted 27th overall. So when you look at Bogdan, right, 13.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists on 44% shooting and 37% from three-point land. The man got $18 million per year, and he's a couple years older than Kyle Kuzma with worse numbers. When you look at Kuz, 16 points a game over the course of his career, 5.5 rebounds, about 2 assists, 44% shooting from the field, and 32 from three. So what's interesting about Kyle Kuzma's extension is, one, he has a player option at the end of his deal, which you don't always see with these rookie extensions. So he's got a player option at the end of his deal. He'll be 27 years old when he can opt out. And I think it's a win-win for both the Lakers and for Kuzma's people. The Lakers got a guy who, like you said, would likely command anywhere from $15 million on up on the open market, right? Again, we just saw Bogdanovic get $18 million per. So it's reasonable to think that Kuzma could get somewhere between 15 to 18 million. Not only that, the Lakers have him for 2 more years, and he's still in his prime. So for 2 more years, he's going to be playing for that max extension that I think that he probably will ultimately try and get later on, assuming his game has evolved to deserve a max extension. But the Lakers get 2 more years of him working hard, showing up, and hopefully improving, right? In a young guy. For Kyle Kuzma, he gets to remain in Los Angeles. He gets to continue to play for championships while LeBron is seemingly extending his prime. Anthony Davis is clearly in his prime, right?
Yes.
And to not have to go anywhere, to stay with a championship contender in Los Angeles when you're a young player, to me that's a win for Kyle Kuzma. And when you compare the extensions, Bogdan 18 mil per, Kuzma's is going to come out to a little bit over 13 million a season. So I think that's an absolute win. And I want to say this at the end of my rant. Rob Pelinka, man, give this man his credit. First, he re-signed KCP for 3 years at roughly 13 per, and everybody thought KCP as a 3-and-D guy would command more than 13 million per season on open market. Yep. Then he re-signs Anthony Davis for 5 years, 190, when nobody thought Anthony Davis was going to take a 5-year deal. And when you consider what Rudy Gobert got today, just today, The Jazz re-signed Rudy Gobert 5 years, $205 million.
That is a
Gobert got
lot.
5 years, $205 million, and he is not Anthony Davis, who the Lakers locked up for a lesser salary. Rob Pelinka seems to get it done. And look, man, 70 days since we won our championship. In my opinion, Rob Pelinka has locked up Executive of the Year. Like that's not a hot take. I know that people love what Sam Presti has done. I know Sam Presti has stacked up like 20 draft picks. I know that there's always some small market GM that people want to give additional credit to. But there is no way in the world that you can't look at Rob Pelinka and say he extended LeBron, he extended Anthony Davis, he re-signed Kyle Kuzma and KCP for lesser contracts.
Yep.
He was able to trade for Dennis Schroeder. He got Trez at $9 million when Trez wasn't on any of our radar. Like we didn't think Trez was even an option in free agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so give Rob Pelinka credit. And I'm going to be starting the campaign Rob Pelinka for executive president of the year, man, because he deserves it.
Yeah, man. He's been a tremendous. I mean, he's just been tremendous. I know there's not even the adjective itself is enough to describe what he's been, and he's been fantastic for the team. I'm glad that also like this front office seems like it doesn't necessarily like pay attention to public sentiment when it comes to its players, also when it comes to making decisions and stuff like that. And so I think that's an important thing. I genuinely do think that this staff and this front office looks at the players in a much different manner than how we look at it. We have a lot of smart folks on Lakers Twitter and stuff like that are able to cut tape and analyze things and crunch the numbers and all that sort of stuff. But there is but part of being a fan that makes it a little bit difficult, not difficult, but part of making a fan that makes it, there's a disconnect is that we tend to look at things with sort of a glass half full sort of situation. And I understand that that's the way that we do it because you're trying to prepare for like the worst possible scenario. But these guys are like on the inside. They really, really know what is it that's going on with Kyle Kuzma's life? What is it going on with his basketball? What are the small things that he has to do to be successful? And I think the same thing that we've always been telling everybody, and most of the chat have probably sick and tired of us saying it, but you can never ignore the human element of this game. You cannot ignore the on-court chemistry that's required. You can't ignore the off-court chemistry that's required. And you can't ignore like what goes on in these people's lives, like these players' lives. Like these are regular human beings like us. For some of them, they do just like kind of they're passionate about their craft, but when they go home, they just want to go home and be themselves. Whether they want to engage on social media or go shopping or hang out with friends or date whoever they want. The understanding the human element of what they are and the human element of what goes on for them in their lives is important. And I think, Rob's, obviously we all know about his background with Kobe and how like intimately he was involved with like Kobe's family and all that sort of stuff. Like his understanding of how agents sort of look at the agent player relationship makes me think that he has a good understanding of what's going on. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because just a few days ago there was a what's it called? Like a report or I think an excerpt in a report by, I don't know if it's Bill Oram or who it was, about Kuzma and his agent going to go talk to Rob, and then them giving the idea that, hey, look, you're gonna have to scrap for minutes.
Yep.
And it's gonna be like a meritocracy. It's not gonna be just just however you think it's going to be. And then all of a sudden, like 2 days later, we get an extension announcement, and it's a pretty good deal. Like when you look at like KCP's deal and you look at his deal, those are like the two deals where you go, oh man, this is like pretty fair. Like this is a lot of money, but at the same time, I'm not mad that he got this number. Now, if that number had been like 15 million a year, I'm sure people would be kind of upset. They'd be like, it's probably 2 million more than you want. But even you and I estimated like if the Lakers can get him somewhere between 10 and 15, that's pretty great because it's very, very hard to find a 3-and-D guy on the market for that amount. Those 3-and-D guys are all going for 12 to 15 million or even more money, depending on how good they actually are. And, we said it on our previous podcast that we don't know how long the Lakers are going to be able to get away with grabbing guys like Avery Bradley for $5 million, Wes Matthews for $3 million, Marc Gasol for a veteran minimum, Markieff Morris for a veteran minimum. you're not always going to be able to keep grabbing those guys. So you have to eventually groom some of those younger guys to be able to fill those roles.
Mm-hmm.
And for all we know, he could contract. And when I say outplay the value of the contract, it's not looking at Kyle Kuzma and saying, well, how much is he scoring compared to the 13 million a year that he's making? It's
Right.
looking at Kyle Kuzma and saying, okay, this is a 6'8", 3-and-D guy. Let me look across the league at all the other guys who are 27 years old, 26 years old, 6'8", 3-and-D guys. Does that value match up?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if the value matches up, then that's a win for the Lakers. Because if you see guys like you mentioned, Bogdanovich, they're different players because Bogdanovich is more on
Sure.
the ball. But like, if you compare him to somebody else that maybe is making more money, um, that does exactly the same thing that he does, like that's the way that you have to sort of look at it. And I think Laker fans sometimes, and you know, I'm not like without being criticized for it. Like sometimes we look at these players and we think to ourselves, well, we're giving him this much money, right? But he's not giving me X amount of production. X amount of production never comes in the form of just what the numbers are. The X amount of numbers may come in regards to the fit. Do you have a young guy who's willing to do everything that you want us to do? Like
Yep.
if Alex Caruso came out to you and said, if Alex Caruso went up to what's it called? If Alex Caruso went to, if he made no skill improvement, right? Let's say he's still the same guy and super excellent defender, but very shaky on the offensive end
Mm-hmm.
and outside of cutting and stuff like that. If Alex Caruso goes and gets a $10 million to $12 million deal, Laker fans are going to love it. They're going to love it not because because obviously his statistical accolades don't match up, but because they watch him. They look at him
Right.
and they go, okay, I can see the impact of what he's doing. He's worth that kind of money. And I think what happened last year is for the first 6 months, there was an expectation. And maybe some of it was also Kuzma putting it on himself that like Kuzma would be this third scorer. But
Right.
what we learned is that we don't need a third scorer. What we learned is we need two guys to play at their all-star MVP type levels, and the rest of the guys to just make their open shots and defend. That's literally all it was. And that's what Kuzma did, at least in the second half and in the playoffs and stuff like that. And now we can take a step further and we can get a little bit deeper to understand, okay, what kind of guys can he actually guard, right? We know
Right.
he can't guard the Zion Williamsons down low.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we got Markieff Morris. But now we're also learning that we can't put him on guys like Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro necessarily, because when he gets hammered by screens over and over again, it's hard for him to get around those screens because he's 6'8", 6'9".
Right.
But that's the same issue that we had with Danny Green, right? So now we have to think about how we kind of fit him in with these sort of situations and what kind of guys that we want him to guard. We can put him next to, he won't defend him very well, but like
Right.
he can at least keep a body in front of Jimmy Butler, or he can keep a body in front of Kawhi Leonard because they're same size guys, same type of player. And so I'm happy that he got his contract. I'm glad that he's not going to have that hung over him. I got the feeling prior to this season starting that would be a very annoying conversation that would
Right.
continually come up over and over again on Lakers Twitter. So I'm glad that's now gone. So it may turn into a, well, Kyle Kuzma's not getting paid enough, or sorry, we're paying him too much to play poorly. So that's probably what'll, on his bad games, that's what's going to happen. But you can't look at him in terms of like how many points are you putting up. You have to look at him based on how we're using him right now, and the way that we want to use him next to LeBron and Anthony Davis and whatever lineups he wants to get into. And that's just my stance, man. Like I already said what I had to say to Lakers Twitter at the. I know, like, trust me, if you're into astrology, I'm not really into astrology too much, but I'm a Capricorn, and so Capricorns don't forget anything. And I definitely remember all the folks telling me that there's like, we should have traded Kuzma for Bijalika. We should have traded Kuzma for like, like just for like any role player that was a better
Right.
3-point shooter. And they couldn't even, like, the Kings couldn't even get Bijalika off their roster. And now, I mean, they have him there, but they're clearly two different players. And I see it all the time. I see all these stance changes on Kuzma, and now people are now like us. They're a little bit more optimistic about him. They're like, okay, we know he can be good at this. We just need him to be a little bit better when it comes to all these other sort of things. So I'm glad he got paid. I'm glad Rob got him at a really great amount, and I'm really happy that the Lakers have more stability with their roster, less question marks about are we
Right.
going to pay this guy, are we not going to pay this guy, all that kind of stuff. So
Well,
I'm glad.
what? So I put Joe's comment. Shout out to Joe. Thanks for the comment. I put it up on the screen because so far everything I'm seeing is everyone loves the deal. Like I haven't seen
Yes.
one person complain. Now I know that there are people that probably don't like it, but thus far, just from my little piece of Lakers Twitter, everybody seems to
Same.
like the deal. And at $13 million, man, I think that's a very reasonable contract. And like you said, who are they going to replace him with? I think Rob Pelinka probably looked around the NBA and said, okay, 25-year-old 6'8" guy who can, on a good night, probably give you 30. And
Hmm.
at worst, at least he's comfortable in the offense. He knows what his role is going to be. He helped win a championship last year. He certainly has improved on defense. There was nowhere else to go, and I think $13 million a season is a steal. You and I talked about this before we went live, so I want to bring a couple of these questions up on the screen because obviously people are asking us about THT, right? THT has certainly arrived this off season, and so Quentin asked us this question: how does this deal affect our ability to retain THT this off season? And Quentin, the quick answer is THT is not up for an extension this offseason. I believe Eric Pincus already tweeted a little while ago that THT, it's I think he's a year out for an extension.
Yes.
I believe so. In terms of THT, it doesn't impact his extension at all. And Liz asked us the same question: just can we extend THT next offseason? Can we extend him next offseason? That's what Eric was talking about, right?
Yeah, so I think he's a restricted free agent next offseason, if I'm not mistaken. And so the Lakers can retain him. So to answer the general question, are we going to be able to keep THT? Let's say he has a breakout year or something like that this
Mm-hmm.
year. Are we going to be able to keep them? Yes, we will. Same thing for same thing for Caruso. Like, are we going because we have their bird rights or we have them in restricted free agency or something like that? We're always going to be able to retain them, so we won't lose them for nothing. Unless the Lakers choose not to bring them back, or maybe it's too
Right.
expensive. Caruso gets like a $20 million deal or some enormous deal that it just doesn't make sense for us to retain the guy. Um, so we can definitely keep all those guys back. The question is, do we extend them now? That's really what the
Right.
question that people want to know. I even if Horton Tucker was eligible for an extension now, I don't think it's very smart for the Lakers to do it now because you have to let him play.
You
We have
got to
to
see
see what he
more.
looks like.
You have to see more than
Yeah,
just the four preseason games.
right. Yeah, and so that's the way I sort of see it. And it's not like I don't believe that he can be great. I think he can be great,
Right.
but if you think about it also this way, it sort of makes sense. Let's say we run into a situation, right? So I think next offseason, Caruso is going to be an unrestricted free agent, right? Let's say THC does end up breaking out, right? This at least, depending on whether Caruso gets extended or not, this at least allows Rob to see that position, like that specific role, where if THC is good enough to maybe even replace Caruso, and
Right.
Caruso gets too expensive for the Lakers, then it's okay that the Lakers let Caruso walk. He's a fan favorite. I understand that, all that sort of stuff. This is strictly like from a business standpoint. I don't think the
Mm-hmm.
Lakers would want him to leave, but
Right.
it allows them to do something like that. And in reality, if you think about it, like it's a smart move. Like we've seen historically, like the role players around LeBron get paid out, right? Rondo ended up getting paid out.
Mm-hmm.
KCP, who we thought was going to get more money, got a decent deal. Same thing with Kuzma. Caruso is another guy who a lot of teams were asking about him at midseason.
Yep.
Just like Kuzma, there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of teams asking about Caruso the last trade deadline. So there is value there around the league for a guy who does what Caruso does. But in the end, I'm sure that they'll figure all that sort of stuff out. So I think the next priority guy, if I don't know if he's eligible for an extension, yeah, he may be. I don't know. But if Caruso's eligible, that's probably the last guy that the Lakers are trying to tackle
Mm-hmm.
to see if they can get that taken care of, assuming Caruso wants to. Like
Right.
Caruso may not want to even have an extension with the Lakers. He may say, "I'm just going to test free agency altogether," and that's essentially what they were going to do with Kuzma until they agreed to the extension. So we'll see. We still have, I think, the extension deadline's tomorrow, end of day tomorrow, I think, and
Yeah,
so
I think it's the 22nd, so it might be close of business.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's still a couple more days, and I don't think it'll take Rob very long to draft up anything that he needs to draft up.
Right.
But we don't have to worry about losing any quality players like that. It's I would say that like these numbers, these figures that we're getting these players
Mm-hmm.
at is pretty awesome. And yes, for the folks that are interested in knowing, no, Kuzma does not have no trade clause from what I've read so far. So he is a tradable asset. Yes, he can be salary filler. Yes, the Lakers can move him to a team that thinks that they can use him better, or they
Mm-hmm.
need a three guy who a 3-and-D guy who can play off the ball and stuff like that. So it's a very good deal. I think it's a fair deal, and you have to remember. You have to reward the folks that help you get there.
That's right.
That is you have to take care of the players. And no matter how inconsistent the player may be, we have to remember that role players are inconsistent. If they weren't inconsistent, they would be stars. And that's just kind of how it works. And so that's that's the way I see it. And I think it's good for the Lakers. I think it's good that we have this stability. Yes. Okay. So I think Bill mentioned that Caruso isn't eligible per Pincus. So
Right.
okay.
Right.
So it looks like Kuzma was probably the last guy that to have that conversation kind of taken care of. So we've got it taken care of. And I will say, they're keeping all these player options and they're keeping the unguaranteed last year for I think KCP and stuff like that. 2 years from now, Lakers are going to try and be big players for in free agency again. So
And Bradley Beal is a free agent, I think, in 2 years.
Yep,
He has a player
that's the
option,
guy.
I think.
Yep, that's the guy that I've had my eyes on. Plays, in a top 10 market, but isn't marketed like a top 10 market player. I think he's going to, if there's any Wizards fans that are watching this, I think that he's going to have an all NBA year this year next to Russell Westbrook, because Westbrook is like that good of a teammate where he kind of brings so many eyeballs to your team because of the ferocity he plays with that people are now going to pay attention to Beal more. So I think his name is going to be real big. And when the time comes and he decides to opt out, I think the Lakers will have a solid shot at getting him. And then, we'll still have to figure out exactly what LeBron is doing, how long he wants to play with the Lakers around then too as well.
I mean, we saw this like during the Shaq Kobe era, right? When the Lakers were winning, guys got extensions. And guys, not only did they get extension with the Lakers, but some guys like Ty Lue had to go elsewhere because they were just getting this larger offers than what the Lakers were prepared to offer. Yep. So you're seeing the same thing with this right now. And look, guys, for the last 6 or 7 years, we've had so many players come in and out of the Lakers organization, and what we've seen now is Rob start to build out continuity, right? So with guys like Kyle Kuzma and with KCP, there's obviously going to be some level of roster turnover, but you want to have most of your core rotation guys locked up year over year, and that's what you're seeing. And if by some chance these guys happen to outperform the contracts that they've now earned, that clearly opens the door for maybe a potential trade or something like that if Rob deems necessary. But at this point, I think there's no reason to believe that guys like KCP, guys like Kyle Kuzma would be on the trading block. Is Rob going to listen? Because I see people asking, would we potentially trade someone like Kyle Kuzma next year? Look, as a smart GM, you have to listen to all deals, right? Except for any deal involving Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Everybody else, I'm sure Rob will listen. If it's a smart deal, he'll take it. But right now, what we're getting is a lot of continuity, and I think that that's really big. I do want to bring in a couple more of these comments.
You want to bring Liz's question for me? How could we bring another big player? And we can address that one. You see that one?
Yep, I got it. I'm bringing it right now.
Yes. So Liz asked a question: how could we bring another big player? Would LeBron have to leave? So this is entirely based on what happens with the revenue situation in 2022-23. So what's expected, at least for this year, is that this year revenue, the salary cap was where it was. They're expecting that maybe the next 2 years, this year, next year, or maybe even the year after, that the salary cap won't increase for more than 2%, which is not that much money. But what they're also thinking is that there's a chance that in 2022-23, if everything comes, let's say the vaccine comes out, fans are allowed back in the stadium by the playoffs this year. This is all wishful thinking, so I don't know. And things get under control. Even 1 year from now, if fans are back allowed, all that revenue starts coming back. And what will happen is the salary cap will go back up because we're assuming that we're not going to get hit by another pandemic. And so the projections will start increasing. What will happen is that the salary cap may potentially go up, which means that, and this is why Anthony Davis taking the deal that he did is such a big deal, because we have him locked into a certain number. Chances are, if LeBron wants to stay beyond the 2022-2023 season, where he'd be I think he'd be 39 or 38 or 39 by the time that happens. Even if he does a 1+1, the Lakers will only have, let's see here, that's 44 plus 37. So 44 plus 37. So that's 81. If we assume the cap goes to like maybe, I think right now it's at 112. So let's say it goes up like a total of 12 million. They'll have like, so minus 120. Sorry, guys, I'm doing math live here in front of you.
This is
So Lakers will have like
real
somewhere
time math,
between like,
fellas.
yeah, and I'm not Pincus. So follow Eric Pincus because his math is much better than mine. This is my amateur cap math. But they'll have like between 20 and 30 million to work with. They'd have to clear out the whole roster, or they have to trade for certain guys and stuff like that. But they can bring a third guy, or they can bring a guy aboard. It may not necessarily be like a superstar tier guy. It may be somebody that's like right there, like the Victor Oladipo types or the Bradley Beal types, depending on who it is. And so it's just coming up with that max money and pairing that guy along with Anthony Davis. So there are things that we can do. I would expect Rob Pelinka to be very smart about it and to keep his options open. But it seems like more and more that that Rob is trying to keep that 2022, 2023 cap space open outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis. And I would expect LeBron obviously to opt into that 44 million last year or do a 1+1 again, like he did the early extension, especially if they win a championship. Like he's definitely going to take that extension again. So it seems like we're not looking for next season as much as we're looking towards, the year after that. That's the year when a lot of guys will be available. And you and I have talked about this before. In the NBA, every 4 years, you have to reassess your roster. And you have to look at it that way because every 4 years, a guy like Jason Tatum or a guy like Donovan Mitchell, they'll be 1 year away from the end of their contracts. And those are the guys that you're looking at moving, the Ben Simmons, those kind of guys. Those are the guys that you're looking at that you want to target moving forward. So those guys are still 3-4 years away before we can have those conversations. But if you guys remember this year, all of those guys took, I think everybody except Brandon Ingram took a player option for their last year. So those are essentially 4-year contracts. And we know the max is going to go up. So opting out, it's not going to be a problem. So that's the way that I would think of it. This is Rob keeping that flexibility, that 4-year flexibility every single time while trying to optimize the amount of championship contention we can get out of the current group that we have.
Well, and to add something to what I said earlier about the trades, people asking about potential trades. For the last couple of years, the Lakers have had so many young guys on those rookie contracts that they've had a hard time cobbling together the money necessary for big trades, right? So they had to send out every one of their young guys, except for Kyle Kuzma to get someone like Anthony Davis. I'm not suggesting that Bradley Beal or somebody like that will be available. I see people asking about Devin Booker. Devin Booker signed until 23-24. The Phoenix Suns are not trading that young man. But if another
Robert Sarver also hates the Lakers, so he's
right. And he wouldn't trade his Trevor Ariza a few years ago. He sent him to DC. So in any case, the Lakers now have, whether it is Kyle Kuzma's contract at over 13 per, KCP's over 13 per. They've got Schroeder. They have Trez. They finally have some money on the books for that could maybe match up with maybe if an All-Star becomes available. But I think at this point, again, I think Rob is keeping his ears open. He's keeping his eyes open. But I don't see that there's a superstar that will be available on the market. And I know people are asking about James Harden, but not to the Lakers, just in terms of where James Harden may end up. I have no idea. Frankly, I don't care. And I don't want to speak for Vinay, but our team is so good at this point. It's so well-rounded with just the right mix of guys that I think it's going to take if Rob was to pull the trigger on a trade, it would have to be like the right kind of guy. Like the names that we're hearing, like a Harden that's available right now, I don't think, as great as James Harden is, Lakers aren't going to gut their team to bring him in and add him with LeBron and Anthony Davis. I don't think so. But what I would say now is that the team is just so well rounded. It's a perfect collection of talent that it's pleasant that Rob has knocked all these deals out. And sometimes during a contract year for guys like Kuz, Vinay, you talked about this earlier, the questions start coming up, right? Like, what about your contract? Should you be starting? Someone asked us in the comments, now that he signed his contract, should he be starting? Look, Frank Vogel and Rob Pelinka already told Kuz and his management, you have to scrap for minutes like everybody else. Like it does not matter if you're outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis. It doesn't matter if you're a $15 million a year guy or you're a vet minimum. If you can play, as we saw in the finals with Markieff Morris and Alex Caruso, or THT when he got some minutes. Frank Vogel is gonna put you in the game and he'll give you an opportunity. But just because Kuz signed an extension right now, that does not guarantee him a starting spot or
Yeah,
even X
absolutely
amount
not.
of minutes. He's got to keep playing hard.
Yeah, and so that's part of the reason why, and we'll jump to the next question, or I think the next question you could probably queue up, Alex, is there's a question about what Kuzma's ceiling may be. I think Clint asked that question. If you want to bring that one up, we can talk about that one next.
All
But
right.
I think the thing that folks should think about is it's very clear that Kuzma is capable of being a starter, right? Because of the fact that he can put up points when he gets enough shots and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And in a designed offense, like a Spurs style designed offense
Right.
or a Raptor style designed offense, he can do that. And he's being compensated accordingly. I think that was the conversation that he probably brought to the table with his agent, probably brought to Rob. He said, look, we know this guy can start, and we know he can put up numbers when you ask him to, but you're going to ask him to come off the bench most likely. So even though we're coming off the bench, he still needs to be compensated to some degree as a starter, and that's essentially why he got the number that he got. And I think I'm fine with that. I totally understand that, and I think it will be more important because if LeBron decides to sit out games or Anthony Davis decides to sit out games, or even if any of the older guys, Markieff, West, any of those guys sit out games, he'll be valuable to play. And so his health will be really important. So what is Kuzma's ceiling? I'm not sure Kuzma's ceiling is Trevor Ariza, because Trevor Ariza was a really, really good defender when he was with the Lakers, at least. And so I would say that Trevor is a little bit more of a better technical defender. So getting
Mm-hmm.
around screens, getting in your dribble space, not letting you get a rhythm and stuff like that. That's what Trevor. That's a very good technical defender. That's what Trevor
Yeah.
Ariza is. He could shoot threes. He could actually spot up. Like he could be a what's it called? He could like spot in for like point forward minutes too, because he was
Mm-hmm.
capable of doing that for very short bursts and stuff like that. He does his job very well. I would actually say that Kuzma's comp is probably somebody like Danny Green. Um, Danny Green isn't a technically amazing defender, but he was a guy who could consistently slide his feet well enough to keep a body in front of certain guys. He was not built to be able to defend very, very dynamic guards. So you couldn't put Danny Green on like Dame Lillard and be like, all right,
Right.
lock him up, shut him down, because Dame could go either hand. He's much more difficult to guard. But Danny Green was a guy where you could say, okay, we're going to put you on Dame, but we need you to follow our instructions and send him this way every single time. And so Danny Green could do something like that. So I think Kuzma's comp is closer to that. A guy who is an able body, who can follow instructions, stay in front of other guys. Occasionally he'll get a steal. He'll come and do the help side blocks. We've seen him
Mm-hmm.
do that before too as well. He's a good help defender, and he's a good big body defender for guys like for bigger guys, the guys that are like Kawhi. I'm trying to think of other
Right.
guys that are like that, like the TJ Warrens and
Mm-hmm.
like guys like that. Like Lakers have deployed him on Tatum. They deployed him on Jaylen Brown. Like Kuzma can get beat on a live dribble. He's not technically sound like Avery Bradley or even Wes Matthews, but for guys who aren't like that, those kind of dynamic guys that can attack you off the dribble, he's capable of doing that. And that's sort of been like Danny Green's hallmark. He was like a steady presence all the time with the help defense and all that sort of stuff. And then he was a really good defender for the bigger guys, the bigger wings around the league. That's what I would compare Kuzma to. The main thing that he has to get right is his shooting has to get better for him to be. If he wants to be a 3-and-D guy who can cut and occasionally be like
Mm-hmm.
a volume scorer for us when we need to, we need the 3 part of the 3-and-D to be a little bit more consistent for that to work. And I think Vogel and those guys will figure it out to some degree.
So I think we need the 3 part, like you said. I'm gonna throw a name out that I know you're not expecting as a comp. Rasheed Lewis. He's a comp
Yeah.
for me. And so if you guys remember Rasheed Lewis when he was a Seattle Supersonic, he played with Ray Allen. He was kind of like the second option. He was a bit younger than Ray, but when he got to Orlando with that team that made it to the finals, that team was obviously headlined by Dwight Howard, but they had Hedo Turkoglu, they had Jameer Nelson. That team was more well rounded, where Rashard didn't need to be the second guy. He was
Yeah.
any given night he might be really the third or fourth. He had the ability to drop 30 on you, but that wasn't what he did. He made a couple All-Star games. I think he was a 2-time All-Star in his career,
Yeah.
maybe 1 or 2 more than that. But He's my comp for Kyle Kuzma. I don't know if he'll be as good as him. He was,
Yeah.
Rasheed was certainly more consistent on the offensive end, but Rasheed
Hmm.
wasn't really known for his defense, right? So Rasheed was 6'10". He was athletic. He could shoot. I think Kyle
Corner
Kuzma
three.
has
He's a big corner three shooter. He's
right.
really good at corner threes. That's how Orlando would play him. Yeah, you're right.
That's Rasheed Lewis is I think that's his ceiling. I've said a couple times. I think you can get a couple All Star games out of Kuzma. It just the circumstances need to be right. He is not this kind of guy. Look, he's not a number one draft pick. He's not a lottery pick where you can just plug him somewhere and he's going to be an all star. That's not who he is. So I think
Hmm.
circumstances need to be right. But I don't even know where Rasheed Lewis came from. But I'm just remembering how good he was, and I think Kuzma could be as good as him given the right situation.
Yeah, I would say the other guy that we discussed was the guy who was his like sort of his mentor last season, and it was Jared Dudley. Like we were talking about how Jared Dudley would like talk to Kuz about how he needed to be successful on defense and what he needed to do, not to worry about his points and all that sort of stuff, and that would end up and that he would get paid regardless of how many points he put up and stuff like that, and I mean, you think about it, like Jared Dudley's role on that Suns team, he was just a defensive guy. He took his
Mm-hmm.
threes. That's historically what he's been asked to do. So like even like a younger Jared Dudley is not a bad comp for a guy like Kuz. Kuzma has a little bit better touch on putting the ball, like the straight line drives and stuff like that he does. He's a little bit better with the ball in his hands and stuff like that. But um, guys like Dudley, guys like Rasheed Lewis, guys like Danny Green, they're never asked to do more than take the open shot, occasionally cut, defend your guy,
Mm-hmm.
follow instructions defensively, and then obviously rebound, do help defense, stuff like that. I think the place where Kuzma could definitely help the Lakers is a place where we Laker fans noticed last season, in the playoffs especially, is he can become a better rebounder.
Right.
Um, Especially when his guy isn't the one who's shooting the ball. If he can come and help be a better rebounder, that'll help him get better rhythms in games. And I think he spends too much time sometimes just kind of hanging around from perimeter to perimeter,
Mm-hmm.
and that ends up being a problem for him. And I think if he comes down and he occasionally grabs maybe one or two extra rebounds, if you ever play basketball, even in pickup basketball, like just touching the ball sometimes is better. It's
Yep.
helpful, and I think that'll be helpful for him. And I think that's probably like an area that he could focus on, like becoming a better rebounder, um, especially in a three happy league. Like a team like the
Mm-hmm.
Suns, they take so many threes that there's going to be a lot of long rebounds. So it's not always going to be a guy like, it's not going to be a guy like Anthony Davis or Montrez grabbing those rebounds. Those rebounds are going to come all the way out to the free throw line or to the baseline or something like that. Those are the games where we really need him to be a quality rebounder.
Let me bring in a couple more questions. So I believe I'm pronouncing this right. Abhay. He said, like PJ Tucker.
Abay. Yeah.
Abhay. Yep. Kuz
Albay,
shoots
yeah, yeah.
53%
Sorry,
on.
it's an Indian name, so I'll be able to pronounce it a little bit better. That's Albay. Nice to meet you,
Um,
Albay.
Kuz shooting 53% from the corners. Now he's better from the corners. I think it's the top of the key where his percentage drops down significantly, especially when he does those dribble pull ups. His 3-point shooting drops down significantly. But do you think that he's going to make any significant improvements with such a quick turnaround this offseason?
I think the fact that he's healthy, assuming his ankle and all
Yeah.
his leg, whatever the foot issue that he had was healthy, that'll be good. Um, I don't know what it is about him, but the way he shoots compared to his short corner, it's just like his mechanics kind of get a little junky when he's taking threes
Yeah.
above the break, especially when they're not on the move. When he's not like gathering into a step. I'm not a shooting coach, so I can't exactly tell you. Like Pete, Laker film room, he's probably a better example of what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
he gets into when Kuzma steps into his three, this is something that they used to talk about when it came to Brandon Ingram. When Brandon Ingram used to step into his threes, he used to get a better motion and better release
Yeah.
on his shot. And Kuzma's kind of like that, but he doesn't do it consistently enough. So the reps aren't quite there, and that's could be because he's an older guy and because he's played the way he's played and all that sort of stuff. But for some reason, that short corner three, which is like the long two distance, he's pretty good at that. And analytically, we know that's supposed to be the very worst. The long two is what the analytics folks don't love, but a short corner three is very valuable. And I also remember last year at midseason, telling folks that Kuzma is a very good short corner three shooter,
Yep.
and that is the most valuable three. And people are like, "What are you talking about? You don't know what he's talking about. We need to trade him for Nemanja Bjelica." And I was just like, "All right, man, like but." That is a valuable three. I don't know if he's going to
Mm-hmm.
hit 50% like PG Tucker is going to keep doing, but that's a very, very good number. If he can get to like around 40, stay in the close to the 40% in that area, that's very valuable for from a schematic standpoint. That basically that allows you to put a 40%. And I think Wes Matthews is like a 40% left hand side corner
Mm-hmm.
shooter. He was like the best left hand corner shooter. Kuzma being a good right hand side corner shooter, that'll basically give you two guys that can hit from 40% in the corners. So that means that if Dennis Schroeder or somebody like that, or LeBron or somebody wants to run their pick and rolls like they normally do, or even Taylor Horton Tucker wants to run his pick and rolls, you'll now have two escape valve passes in the corners for either one of those guys. And if
Mm-hmm.
they are hitting at a 40% clip, that is a monster advantage and they may not even get the shots because if their defender never leaves them, that pass isn't coming to them. But we would assume that means that Taylor Horton Tucker or Caruso or Schroeder is getting themselves better looks at the rim. So all these things are all complementary to each other. So it'll never be like it'll never be like one of those things where it's just like, oh, he's a 40% shooter, so we're always going to pass it to him in that corner,
Right.
no matter what the possession is. Not all possessions are created equal. And so what we'll see happen most likely is the Lakers will put their guys in a position to be successful, and hopefully the execution works out the way that we expect it to.
Frank Vogel's done a really good job putting these guys in the right spots, and I think that he's probably surprised a lot of fans at how good of an offensive coach he is. And that's not all him. His coaching staff, Lionel Hollins, Jason Kidd, two other guys that I don't know if a lot of Lakers fans thought as highly of before last season. But those
Mm-hmm.
guys, everybody on that coaching staff has helped put these guys in the right spot. And I think Kuzma, I don't know what kind of leap he has in him. I don't know how much better he can get. There are certainly things that he can work on going forward. But I think just getting him at this price, I think just getting that out of the way, getting the contract extension out of the way, when we're trying to repeat, because I know that all Lakers fans out there want this team to repeat. This is one
Mm-hmm.
less thing that Frank Vogel has to worry about, that Rob Pelinka has to worry about, that Kyle Kuzma himself. Now that you've got Trez and Dennis Schroeder, I'm sure in the back of Kyle Kuzma's head, it was, well, where does that leave me? Like, I thought I would be the
Right.
third or fourth guy, and now you bring in these two guys that averaged 18 apiece last season. Like, how do I fit in with that? How do I get my shots? And I think it just kind of evens all of that out, and this team should be pretty solid going forward. Um, I don't know, man. We've talked a lot. There are a couple more questions. Let me see. There are more questions coming in. Um, Brian, we
Yeah,
started about 46 minutes ago, man. This is
yeah.
impromptu because of the Kyle Kuzma news. So you can certainly rewatch it on YouTube if you want later on. But I don't know, Vinay, anything else that you want to add? Do you think we're going to get any more surprises from this Lakers team, contract-wise or trade-wise or anything? Season starts in 2 days, but I think we're pretty
Yeah.
much set, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything drastic to come through. I think somebody in the chat already said that Caruso is not eligible for an extension, so there's no
Right.
conversation really there. THT, we discussed, we just got to see how he actually plays
Mm-hmm.
before we extend him out. We both you and I are very optimistic about his chances, as is the rest of Lakers Twitter. It's a great deal. Rob has knocked everything out of the park. And really, we won't know what problems the roster has. We won't know any deficiencies the roster has until the season actually plays out. And to be honest, like I know that maybe through the first 10 games, if we see something that's an issue with this roster, I know our front office will also try to address it, but they
Mm-hmm.
may not address it in the timeline that we expect them to address it because,
Right.
we're under the hard cap and stuff like that. So we just have to be kind of sort of like patient when it comes to it. And, like I've tried to tell Laker fans, like the NBA did not care about the Lakers in terms of like giving
No.
us a fair amount of off-season time. And that goes for the, like for Heat fans as well and everybody else that made it to the Eastern Western Conference Finals. So I'm just going to continue enjoying
Mm-hmm.
the start of this season. I'm not going to stress wins or losses. They could come out playing 500 basketball and it'll mean nothing to me
Well, that's
because
what Clint was
uh,
asking us. What do we think the record will be? Clint, I have no idea. They'll be good.
no
That's
idea.
all I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I think Vegas had them at about 46 games. Oh,
Hmm.
46 and a half games is the over under. I think that's about right. I think some folks that are very bullish, which is fine, on the Lakers, they've been saying that they've been saying like, oh, they can win like 60 games, which means that they would only lose 12 games this season. I don't
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be that gung ho about like going for that many wins. My guess is like somewhere right around 50, maybe is
Hmm.
probably like the right number. But it'll depend. Like the games that LeBron sits out, what does this team look like? Are they still humming on the offensive, defensive end, that sort of thing? So I think the Lakers will end up with like a top 3 seed. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with the number 1 seed overall. But I think they're going to be very smart. LeBron has said it over and over again. He said it on the Road Tripping podcast. The number one most important thing for this team is to be healthy,
Yep.
COVID related and just injury wise. We already saw Dennis Schroeder have an ankle tweak. We've already
Hmm.
seen Alex Caruso get kneed in the hip or something like that. I think guys, because I know there's a few other questions coming in last minute
Hmm.
about Taylor Horton Tucker, how many minutes he's going to get. Um, those guys are all going to be important. Those guys are like a guy like Taylor Horton Tucker is going to get minutes because I don't think Vogel's going to want to play Alex Caruso and his like balls to the wall style defense where he
Right.
goes hardcore all the time. He's going to get nicked up here and there, and there are going to be games where he's going to give him a break, or he'll lower his minute limit.
Hmm.
Like maybe Caruso will only play 10 minutes, and some more of those minutes will go to Taylor Horton Tucker. So it's a good problem to have, but we'll just have to see how they manage it. It sounds like the health is going to be the biggest priority for them.
I agree. What you want to take a couple more questions? You got time?
Yeah, I mean, we can take a couple more questions.
Let's close out on this question because this is an interesting one. This is from Brian Two Fly. How do you explain that the talks supposedly ceased earlier in the week? You know what I think happened, man? I think that the Lakers and Kyle Kuzma and his people, they had a conversation about this is probably the number that we're at, and
Yeah.
the Lakers may have laid that number on the table and said, if you want it, accept it. Otherwise, we'll revisit this at the end of the season. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure he and his agent and his team did their due diligence, talked about what they thought the market would be in the offseason, and that's
Mm-hmm.
probably how they came to terms. I don't, or maybe that was just all smoke. I don't know, but I think that the Lakers always had a number, and they probably weren't going to deviate too much from that.
Right. And it may have been a situation where they did like a back and forth. Kyle
Right.
came in with a certain number. The Lakers said, we can offer you this number. I think historically, the team actually offers their number first. So chances are they offered a number and they said, you can go and think about what you want to do and stuff like that. And then when Kyle came back, he either agreed to it or maybe they met somewhere in the middle, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
number, the expectation may be. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's not the number. It's like the number of years. So like
Right.
maybe Kyle went back and said, "Look, I'm okay with playing at this number, but can I get a player option for my third year?"
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because I think it was the same thing with KCP. They must have looked at it and they said, "Look, we really want to keep our cap space as open as possible for 2022, 2023 because we want to target certain guys in free agency." So I think that was definitely a part of the conversation. Like the only guy that they know for sure that they want on this roster beyond that period of time is Anthony Davis. That's the future. That's the guy that we're going to build with. Everybody else, we can only extend you up to this certain point. So that could have been something, like maybe Kuzma thought I can leave early and get the same number versus staying with the Lakers. So whatever it was, I think it was always a fluid situation. I think sometimes the way it's framed in when writers share that information with us, it makes it sound like it's a little bit more finite when it actually isn't. And I don't think Rob Pelinka is the type of guy to just say take it or leave it. He's always
Right.
pretty fluid in some of those conversations. That's kind of his hallmark as a player. So, yeah, I think that's probably what happened. I think what you said is probably what happened too as well. And I think it's the right way to do it. I think it's the right way to approach it. All the guys that helped deliver a championship to the Lakers last season that are eligible for extensions or to get repaid or to
Mm-hmm.
move on or whatever, they all got taken care of. And so we don't have to worry about that specific situation until next year.
So, guys, we're going to close out on that. We really thank you for all your questions. I know there were some we couldn't get to, but we're coming up on just about an hour. And this was an impromptu podcast with the breaking news. So we want to thank you. We will be back on Tuesday, opening night at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, when the Lakers take on the Clippers. So we'll do a pregame show then. But you see my name on the screen at Alex Holling on Twitter. You see Vinay's at VKillum. And you see Lakers Central. Feel free to hit us up on the timeline on Twitter. Otherwise, just join us for the next live stream on YouTube or any platform that you're watching this on. You want to close out, Vinay?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for everybody for joining. We sincerely appreciate it. We ended up getting a lot of people watching the pregame last time, which was amazing. Um, I'm I'd like to say that I have a very good memory to some degree, so I'm seeing many familiar names in the chat. Ablay, Clint, a few new names, Brian, and if I missed anybody, I apologize. If there's any questions that we missed, I apologize. We apologize for that as well. We'll make sure that we try to get to that next time. But we just appreciate you guys. We both love talking about basketball, and we love talking about the Lakers, and we're very passionate about this team. See folks that are, on a Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, willing to jump in on a chat and talk about Kyle Kuzma's extension. So I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their weekend, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Special shout out to ODTA, the Pacers fan who was in the live stream with us last live stream. He joined us again today.
He's
so
here
a Pacers
today.
fan joined us. So thank you, man. We appreciate all the non-Lakers fans that watch us. So we'll close out on that, everybody. You've been watching or listening to Laker Central.